Hi everybody, Luke Film Boss here, and I just pulled into the AMC parking lot where I'm going to be seeing The Batman for the first time. I am super excited for this film. It starts in a little less than an hour, and I cannot wait for this thing. I have waited for so long since DC Fandom, what was it, 2020? Dang, this has been a long wait, but it is finally here. I have heard a lot of good things about this film. I am excited. Just got out of the theater. It was quite a movie. Very, very good. I'm gonna go further in the review, but just initial thoughts. It was definitely different than pretty much any other Batman film that we've ever gotten. And action was great. I'd say it's probably the best looking superhero movie I've ever seen that's ever come out. The only ones that maybe even compete are Zack Snyder's movies. And I'm back here to give you my final thoughts on The Batman. This is the non-spoiler review, although I am probably going to make a video that does a deep dive into this film with tons of spoilers. Not sure when that's going to be coming out. It's probably going to be a pretty difficult video to make. It's going to be a lot more detailed than most of my reviews, but I think this film is worth it. Just some initial thoughts. This film is very good looking. It is probably the best looking superhero film ever in terms of style, consistency, angles. Like, the cinematography is great. Some people might not like the darker aesthetic or the grittiness, but like, it is very artistically filmed. And the only person that I'd say made a superhero film that looked better, or at least as good, would be Zack Snyder with his movies, or maybe Logan, and I might be forgetting a few. Tim Burton was very stylistic, as well as Sam Raimi, but because of the time period, they weren't able to perfect the visual style or the look. Whereas this film, The Batman, pretty much every shot is pretty much perfected. But that doesn't mean that this is the best superhero movie of all time. It is definitely not, but visually, this film was very well made. And along with that, the action was high energy, very well choreographed. I wish I would have had a little bit more of just one-shot action. There was a lot of cuts in between, and I think there's reasons for that. One of them being that they had to film this during a pandemic, so maybe they didn't have quite as much space in every single situation. That it might look like they have more space in the movie, but in reality they probably had less space to shoot, or maybe they just chose to have it in a lot of different cuts. It still looks good. It's definitely better action than the Christian Bale movies, at least in terms of the fighting action scenes. And the car chase was quite an action scene. It's definitely better than the Nolan films in the action regard and the visual regard. The Nolan films are also very artistically stylized. But I'd say this film falls short in the action department. And I'm just talking about Batman action. It falls short of Snyder's work. I think that Snyder's car chase, where Batman's trying to get the kryptonite, is still the superior Batmobile chase. And the warehouse scene is still easily the best Batman action scene. In the story department, this film was pretty basic, actually. It wasn't bad by any means. This film goes for this gritty crime, murder mystery, and it somewhat succeeds with the tone and the feel, and some of the murders definitely were along the lines of what I've heard from Seven. It's definitely comparable to that film, although I have not seen that film. But that's kind of what it was going for, and it somewhat succeeds. Like I said, it kind of was lacking. The mystery aspect, there wasn't really much of a mystery. They're just trying to catch the Riddler. There's not some big mystery. There's really no big reveals. You're not trying to find out really who the Riddler is. so much as you're just trying to find out where he's at. And so it really felt lacking in like that department. None of the riddles felt like they had any big payoff. Like, he solves them, and then it's like there's not really much else besides then there's another murder, and that gives him another clue, and then there's just like this one big riddle that he has to solve, which technically he doesn't actually figure it out, and things happen. I don't want to spoil anything, but pretty much there was no big reveals or no big payoff with the mystery. It was just kind of there and drove the plot forward, but wasn't really surprising as a murder mystery I think should be. And pretty much the other part of the story where it's like you're discovering some of Gotham's history and like the corruption in Gotham, and you're learning about the different people who run like the clubs and like the corruption within the police force and stuff. It is done well, but it's kind of already been done. I felt like this movie did focus a little bit more on the corruption in Gotham, more so than the Dark Knight films did. The Dark Knight films, yeah, Gotham was a bad place, and the League of Shadows was like, it's so bad that we've got to stop it. And then you had the mob and everything. But in this film, I like how it does show a little bit more of the corruption within the city, within like the government officials and the cops. The Dark Knight did show the corruption of the cops a little bit, but not to this degree. So I did think that this film was better in that regard, but it was still kind of treading on familiar waters, and it has good pacing. It can be slow at times, and it's a very long film, so you might end up feeling the length, but it's actually very well paced in my opinion. The slow parts are dealt very well, and then you get to some high energy action, or sometimes there's like some suspense that's not even related to action. Although I felt like there should have been a lot more suspense in this film than there was. There was a few times where I was literally like in my seat, like anxious, and then I actually like started biting one of my fingernails at one point. Not like scared, but I was just like really into it. And so like this film is very good in what it does, but once again, it's not the best. It treads on familiar grounds. It doesn't have a huge payoff at the end, and I think that has to do with the characters, which I'll get into in this next bit. The characters in this film were actually rather weak compared to other Batman films. I heard a lot of good things about Robert Pattinson's Batman, and yes, there are a lot of good things. First off, I think that his suit is the best Batman suit that we have ever gotten. Not too far ahead of Ben Affleck's Batman suit, but it is definitely the best looking suit. And then Robert Pattinson did a good acting job, and his character was interesting enough. I like how he kind of narrates some of, like at the beginning and the end, kind of narrates what he's feeling. And so we kind of do get into the psyche of Bruce Wayne a little bit, but not nearly enough. And as the movie progresses, there's a lot of themes that the movie has with Bruce Wayne and Batman's character, but it doesn't, like, again, it doesn't fully like follow through with them or have a big payoff with that. It kind of like sets up something and then kind of abandons that somewhat throughout the rest of the movie, and then at the end it kind of brings you back to the idea. And like, I don't want to spoil anything. For me, themes and messages and stuff like that is what makes a movie really good. And technically, you can't really like spoil that if it's done well. But I just like to be able to experience it for the first time. So I'm not going to like dive into what those themes are. All I'm going to say is that there are themes, and I felt like they did not develop those themes or the characters, which is how you develop the theme, well enough. I would rank each one of these characters in a specific order. First off, there were some really great characters. I liked the Penguin slash Oz, that's his actual name. He was really good. I'd say he's probably my favorite character and definitely one of the best. My second favorite character would have to be Selena Kyle as Catwoman. Um, like I said, she's my second favorite, but I'd actually say she's probably the best, most developed, and interesting character of the whole movie. She definitely had the most, probably the most emotional story, and she definitely had a lot of payoff from beginning to end. She was done very well. Then you would have, I would put Batman, Bruce Wayne. He was good. I wish we would have gotten a little bit more into his psyche and like the way he thinks, the way he views the world. And I wish that they would have fallen through throughout the movie rather than just setting up something at the beginning and then talking about it at the end. I wish that they would have really delved into what he was thinking in the middle portion of the movie, but that was kind of just like left to the plot progressing, and so he was just solving the riddle and everything without getting much to his character and what he's really thinking. Although there were a few good moments in here that I'm not going to spoil, but definitely Batman was a good character. I wouldn't say he's the best Batman, although I would say he is probably the most interesting Batman, in my opinion, besides Ben Affleck. Pattinson's Batman was also, I think he was done a little bit better than Christian Bale's Batman from the Dark Knight series. Although I think Christian Bale probably tops Pattinson in Batman Begins. But after that, Christian Bale kind of got overshadowed by everything else in his own franchise. So Pattinson was definitely good as Batman. I wouldn't say he was amazing or even great, but he was very interesting. Next, I said I probably would put Falcone, Carmine Falcone. He didn't have a huge role to play for most of the film, but then he actually got pretty important in the story, and I just like the actor. I don't know who the actor who played him was, but he did a very good job and made an interesting character. Next, I would say Commissioner Gordon. Commissioner Gordon is never like, in my opinion, has never been one of the most interesting Batman characters, but his character in The Dark Knight was great. And from the Batman animated series, he was a very, very interesting and important part. Although he was never like in the forefront of that animated series, he was very, very distinguishable. Like he made his signature. In this film, Commissioner Gordon was good. He definitely plays a good role with helping Batman, but it's definitely not the best Commissioner Gordon we've had. I'd say this is where The Dark Knight definitely did exceed this film. Well, The Dark Knight actually exceeded this film in many spots. The only exception being that it had a less interesting Batman. But everything else, The Dark Knight exceeds in for the most part. But there, Commissioner Gordon below Falcone. And then I would put the Riddler. The Riddler should have been like number 1 or 2 on this list. But the Riddler was kind of misused. Like, they did him right. Like, he's the guy who makes the riddles for Batman, and he's crazy and stuff. But they never really developed his character. Like, he's always just that guy in the shadow, and they kind of tried to keep him a mystery, and like they're trying to like find the Riddler, but they never actually really care about who he is as a person. And neither does this movie. And that was kind of disappointing because there was a lot of potential that they could have done with the Riddler in this movie. I'm going to get into my deeper breakdown. I'm going to pretty much give a breakthrough of how I think they should have pretty much told the Riddler's story in this film. But he pretty much has no connection to Batman. As much as this movie tries to make you think, oh, Batman's part of Batman and the Waynes are really part of what made the Riddler who the Riddler is or whatever. Like, it really didn't I didn't care because they didn't develop his character whatsoever. They tried, and most of it was exposition, which was very, I found it to be lazily done. It kind of made you realize where the Riddler was coming from, and there was enough setup that when he does explain his motives at the end, it makes sense, but you don't really care. Like, the Riddler's kind of right. Like, he's not doing the right thing, but his motives and his ideas, he's not necessarily wrong in what he's saying, but you just don't care, and you don't root for this character whatsoever, which is kind of what I thought they were trying to do. Maybe they weren't. Maybe he was just pure crazy evil, but I felt like you could have understood more of where he was coming from, but just because of how poorly developed and just how dumb he ends up playing a role in this movie, you don't really care about his plan or his backstory or anything. So Riddler was a very missed opportunity. And then at the bottom of like main characters, I would put Alfred, just because he didn't Andy Serkis didn't do a bad job acting, but Alfred just has very little to play in this movie. Like, he has very few scenes, and he doesn't play an important role, so that's why he's at the bottom of the list. But pretty much the themes and the characters were all very much missed opportunity that could have been developed much better. This movie had 3 hours on its hand almost, and didn't do a good job with its themes or its characters for the most part. Some of them, like I said, Catwoman, Penguin, and Batman were done fairly well, and then some of the smaller roles were done well, but they weren't done as good as they could have been. Batman was lacking, Riddler was complete missed opportunity, and characters like Commissioner Gordon, Falcone, and Alfred, they were pretty good, but they just had very little to play. The exception being Falcone had a little bit more to play in the story than the rest of them, but overall, kind of a missed opportunity. So, The Batman 2022 is kind of a hard film to rank and to review, because on one hand, like from a craft point of view, like a filmmaking, artistic point of view, this film is like top notch. It is great. But then from like a character, theme, and like even a story point of view, it's kind of lacking. It's basic, it's underdeveloped, but by no means bad. It's definitely good, and in some parts of it are great, but it's just, overall, it's just lacking. So I give The Batman a 91% in quality and an 83% in enjoyment, for an overall score of 87%. It's one of the best Batman films ever made, but it's one of my least favorite. So, thank you all for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell to help you be on the lookout for more videos from Luke Film Boss.